Well, we're really fortunate to have as our guest speakers two of our own. Regina, you're already back in the fold. And they're going to give us a presentation on some programs, Bridges Out of Poverty, and Getting Ahead in a Just Getting By World. And this program is actually, these programs are being utilized right now at Queen Palmer Elementary. And you may or may not know this, but we're a community partner. We sort of adopted Queen Palmer as our to be a community partner, and we do a number of things with them. So let me tell you, sometimes when you're talking about someone in your own family, you kind of forget how the outside world might look at them. So I actually have their credentials here. Listen very carefully. Dr. Regina Lewis presents and facilitates on topics of cultural competence, cross-cultural leveraging, interpersonal communication, among others. She is a Desert Storm War veteran.
Woo! Thank you for your service.
She owns her own small business. It's called Regina Speaking. And she's the department chair and professor of communication at Pikes Peak Community College. In addition, she's an adjunct professor at UCCS and an executive coach for the Center of Creative Leadership. She has a doctorate in educational leadership, research, and policy, a master's and a Bachelor of Arts in Communication, and a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. These all were from the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. Woo! All right, and Bart Gibbons and I both come from Nebraska, as does Craig and Maggie. So that's like good credentials. He has over 40 years experience in domestic and international anti-poverty work. Early in his career, and sometime you need to talk with him, he served 3 years as a volunteer in Santiago, Chile, and has served as an executive director for several nonprofit agencies. Most recently for Pikes Peak Community Action Agency, is now called REACH Pikes Peak. And he retired in 2007 from that. He's currently an adjunct instructor at Pikes Peak Community College, continues his community volunteer work. He's the president of the board of directors for Grescio, did I say it right? Housing, and is a volunteer for the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, the VITA program. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from Creighton University and a Master of Arts degree in education, vocational rehabilitation counseling from Michigan State University. So these two individuals from diverse backgrounds have developed this unlikely relationship, but not unlikely to me, of mutual respect. Both are certified trainers for Bridges Out of Poverty and have teamed up to provide training workshops in the community for the past 10 years. So please give them a good hand.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Well, it's our pleasure to be here. As Carol mentioned, we do come from very diverse backgrounds. I grew up on a Nebraska farm, not having very many financial resources, but never were we lacking of food. So and I grew up in typical middle-class values of achievement and education. So with that, go ahead.
Okay. And so, hi everybody, I'm really happy to be here, really happy. When I think about my background, I grew up in poverty, and it was called generational poverty. When you're in generational poverty, that means that at least 2 to 3 of your generations back before you was in poverty, and that was our case. And it was through the military that my father was in that pulled us out of that, and we started to live differently. But then I found myself in situational poverty, and as some of you know, my son did lose his father, who was serving in the military in 2001. He was in a plane crash, and I was left with raising my son at that time. But through it all, it was amazing that I met Bart, because Bart was actually at Pikes Peak Community Action Agency. He was the CEO, and I was one of the clients. And now we work side by side. And what's been most important is that we work with having a relationship of mutual respect.
Thank you. Okay. On your tables, just for the interest of time, on your tables you have these cards here. And in the meantime, you can fill out this quiz. There's 3 of them, 2 of them on the front and 1 on the back. So, Bridges Out of Poverty is a framework for understanding poverty. It's not a program, it's simply just a framework. Let's see what we do to get this thing going here.
And also, just to keep in mind that when you think about a framework, it's not about how do you get a person out of poverty. That's not the goal. It's about understanding people from different class who operate from different hidden rules and behaviors.
So to begin with, to really get to the understanding, that's the core of the reasons why we do what we do. But we all observe what we do. And when it comes to class, when it comes to poverty, you know, we see people on the street, we see the behaviors, and we don't understand why they make the decisions that they do. So to really get to the why, you got to go through the how, which is the explanation of why they do what they do.
Absolutely. So what I want you to do is we're going to do a slight exercise. There are also 3x5 cards on your table. And if you would pull 3 apiece, so everybody pull 3 3x5 cards, and be prepared to write. So either pull out your pen or share a pen with someone.
There's some pencils on some of the tables there.
There should be enough on every table, but if not, let us know. We'll make sure that you do get a couple more. What you're going to be doing, these cards are like a gift to you. I want you to think about the values that you hold in your life that are the most important to you. What do you live by that makes a person look at you and say, that's why you are who you are? What does it mean to you? And I want you to think about your top 3 values, and I want you to write 1 on each one of those cards on the line side, the side that has lines on it. Write 1 on each side. So if I were to put down what my top 3 values are, then one of them would definitely be persistence and perseverance, right? That would be one of my values. Family is definitely one of my values. But you think about what your values are that wakes you up and gets you moving every single day. Once you have those 3 values written down, I want you to look at all 3. I want you to spread them out in your hand like playing cards. And I want you to just look at them for a moment and think about how they make you feel. And I also want you to think about what would life be like if those values were taken away from you. What would it mean? Now what's going to happen is that I'm going to put you through a little scenario in which what you're going to do is you're going to try to keep your values. But you really don't have any control over that. Much like many people in our society, when we start thinking of people who are under-resourced, we have to think about those individuals who has to follow a lifestyle in which they may not be able to meet. They may not have the resources to actually be there. And if they don't, they are judged by it, they are evaluated by it, and oftentimes the values that they have are taken away. Let me give you an example. I had a young man, I was working in Utah, speaking to all of the judges in the state of Utah. And what they said was, in order for you to get your children back, you must serve them 3 healthy meals and 2 healthy snacks every day for 5 days. He failed. He didn't get his children back. And it was really interesting because what he was feeding them was ramen noodles, macaroni and cheese, McDonald's. And he was judged on that. They did not take into account that he couldn't afford anything else. And so once his children were taken away and not given back, what did he have? Why should he even care? If you don't have the right answer, if you're not in the right place, then oftentimes your values will be stripped from you. So what's going to happen is you have to pair up with somebody next to you. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. When you answer them by telling it to the person you're paired up with. If you get it correct, you get to keep your card. If you don't, your partner takes one of the cards. They don't get to select which one they pick. They just randomly select one, and you don't get an opportunity to give them a value. So here we go. I'm thinking of a number. It's in my head. I want you to guess what number I'm thinking. You get it right, you keep your card. You get it wrong, they take the card. So tell your neighbor, what number am I thinking about? I love it. Somebody said, between what and what? I'm not telling you. And if I overhear you, I'm going to change the number. Okay. Did everybody tell a number? Make sure that you are paired off with somebody. If you have an odd number, let me know, because you'll need to be pulling from someone. Okay, so Bart, what number am I thinking?
66.
Anybody get 66? I knew it. We've been doing this for what, 9 years, and nobody's ever figured it out. Start spreading the rumor. It's 66. So since you did not, I want you to take one card from the other person and look at what card you just took from them. Pull a value from the other person and see which one you've actually taken. Now, I want you to think for a moment. I want you to look at the card that you've just taken from someone. And I want you to think about how that really plays out in society when we have to take someone else's value from them. And now what I want you to do is the card that you just took, I want you to ball it up and toss it in front of that other person. So, let me tell you what that looks like, right? So I have a young man that, I have two young men that were in my class, and I have a very stringent attendance policy. You're not there the first time, you lose no points. The second time, 33 points. The next time, 33 points. And the last time, the remaining 34 points. 100 points taken away from you. That makes it impossible to get an A in a 1,000-point class. I have one young man who would fall asleep, and he would show up to my class late. I knew that he was falling asleep because he could not sleep at night. He had night terrors. He had PTSD. But because of the policy, I had to take it from him. I had a young man who did not have and could not afford a vehicle. So he would take an Uber to school. And he would always be about 5 minutes late. And my late policy was 33 points. And I'd have to take it away. And it was gut-wrenching inside. Because how could I change and adjust for this person but not for this one over here? That would be considered discrimination. So it hurt. So I can just imagine when you took that and you balled it up, how you must have felt. Now, before I keep going, how many of you have children? Raise your hand. Keep your hands raised up high. Look to see if your partner has raised their hand. If so, take one of theirs. I know I just set you up. Go ahead and take one of theirs. Take their value. I want you to look at the value that you've just taken from someone.
I've got no values left.
So for those of you who just had a value taken from you, I just want you to reflect for a moment how that makes you feel inside. How that makes you feel knowing that that value is taken from you. And with the value that you have left, or values that you have left, do they mean the same thing? Do you even care? Now, the value that was just taken from you, what I want you to do is the one that you've taken, I want you to now rip it up.
The one you just took from somebody.
So many of you probably know my story, and some of you don't. But I will say this, there was a point in my life where my son and I, and when he was very young, we were homeless. And when we started to find resources, one of them was food stamps. And I would go to the food stamp office and I would collect my $279 to help my son and I eat. One of my values was honesty. And I was told, do not tell them that somebody just gave you a car. Don't tell them. I said, if they ask me, I will have to tell them because I pride myself in honesty. So they asked, and I wrote down that I just received a vehicle, and they stopped my food stamps that day. It taught me how to lie. Because if I need to feed my son, I would do whatever I had to, and I would say whatever I had to feed him. But these are the things that happen in our society. And it's no joke. And things are constantly being taken away from you every single day. And when that happens, how do you feel? Look at the one card or two cards that you have left. And whatever it is that you have left, I want you to hold them near to you, and I want you to think about what would you do to hold on to those if that's all you have left. One of my greatest values is being able to be prideful in where I come from and who I am. And one of the things as I was moving up in society that I had to learn was how to articulate my words differently. And this stripped away from me something that I hold near and dear. When I go to Baltimore, they don't even like talking to me. They're like, who are you? Because this isn't the dialect that I typically use. I'm used to saying, yo, what's up? You know what? I'll see you on the side, you know what I'm saying? But if I did that and said, yeah, and I'm Dr. Lewis, no one would understand. So I had to pull that away. How do you think that makes me feel on a daily basis? When you yourself have to choose to take away your own values in order to think about how real, you know, I know that this is an exercise. And you can walk away from here and say, no one can ever take away my values, and this is who I am. But there are people in our society in which they don't have a choice. How does that make them feel? Keep this exercise in mind as we go through the rest of our exercise.
Claudine, where do our values come from? They come from how we were raised, come from our families, our communities, and so on. You know, the arithmetic of life doesn't always work for people who are under-resourced. They have to constantly be making those kinds of choices. Do I buy my medication or get food for my kids? Do I leave my job, we're on an hourly wage, do I leave my job to go to the school to pick up my sick child? I lose $150, you know, out of my check because I'm not there. Constantly having to choose.
I know that my son went to the Colorado Springs School, but he received the scholarship through the Oprah Winfrey Show. And it was fantastic. But the parents would be there for the games. And they would be the first ones to pick up their child. And they would then see Regina coming around the corner. But I had to choose whether to go pick up my son and take a chance on losing my job or losing some of those hourly wages or stay at work and pick him up later. So this stuff is real.
This is called the tyranny of the moment. And people are making decisions based on the here and now. Whatever is right in front of me is what I'm going to have to choose. There's no space there between whatever happens and what I feel or what I think. There's no thought to it. It's simply a reaction. And usually what happens because of the environment, and it's pretty chaotic, there's pretty much fairly low in terms of emotional intelligence. So that's one of the resources that they may be low in. So what happens is immediately perhaps an altercation will happen. You see this with the police sometimes, you know. So
And let me just say this, it's also relatable, if you go back one slide for a second. It's very relatable because you all know, this usually happens right around New Year's. We decide that we're going to get fit, we're going to do something different, and we get excited about it. But all of a sudden, we end up in that tyranny of the moment. Because as it says here, it's learn patterns of behavior. It's instantaneous. It lacks conscious or no intention. It's automatic, bypassing the ability to choose, and it's an unconscious choice. So I see them in the gym all the time. So I'm Miss Colorado Natural 2012, right? It takes a lot of discipline, a lot of time, and you're constantly in the gym. But every time around January, you see a new flood of people come in. But they're doing this learned patterns of behavior, and before we could get to March, they start to fade out because of this tyranny of the moment right here. So it's the same type of concept in their minds.
There's a book out called Scarcity, and talks about poverty. And what this slides, this is a quote out of that book, is that poverty, people who are in poverty and everything that's all concerned with, they don't have the brain power left to think about other kinds of things like a college education, like advanced degrees, those kinds of things. So how do people make those kinds of decisions? And this is a real life case. There was a group of women in a low income were going through the Getting Ahead program, and they were asked to describe how do they make the decisions. And this one woman drew these balloons. And they said, well, explain that. And she said, whichever one floats down. So if that's how decisions are being made, whichever one floats down, there's no future story there. There's no thought that goes into it. It's a mere reaction because now today, I got to pay the rent, otherwise I'm going to get evicted, or my utilities are going to get cut off. So I have to take the money to pay for that rather than going to the doctor, whatever, So whichever one floats down. So in the Bridges Out of Poverty, poverty is described or defined in this way to the extent that one in which a person is resource insecure. There's a lack of resources. That's the definition of poverty.
And so oftentimes you'll see people who will make these choices, and then we automatically have a feeling like, why would they choose this way? There was a family that decided that their child, they knew that their child needed insulin, and the insulin had to stay cool. They did not have a refrigerator, so they kept it in a cooler. So there were groups of people, such as yourself, Service Above Self, that decided to raise the money, get a refrigerator, and give it to this family. The family was very excited about it. 30 days later, a couple of people went back to see how the family was doing and see how they were interacting with the refrigerator. To their surprise, the refrigerator was gone, the cooler was back, and in its place was a big screen television. Right. So you start to, and I get it, that, why would somebody ever do that? Because we're operating from our lens. And we're operating from a lens that has many more resources, where we are secure in our resources. But when you have an opportunity like that, then you make other choices. That big screen television will serve the entire family because maybe they didn't have food to put into that refrigerator, right? It could become the babysitter. It could be a mental break. It could be a way for people to learn what's going on outside of their community. So we don't know, we don't always understand, but we're quick to judge because of where we come from. So always keep those types of things in mind.
And this quote here is also from Scarcity. When your bandwidth is loaded, you're just more likely not to notice things. You're more likely to not resist things that you should. You're going to have less patience, and you're going to devote lesser time to your children when they come home. So, because your bandwidth is overloaded, you're constantly bombarded with all these decisions.
So here it is. As Bart had pointed out earlier, you have the sheets of paper that talk about could you survive. If you have not finished filling that out, if you wouldn't mind putting the check marks over those things that you could actually do to survive in these 3 different classes. But as you can see here, the poor, when we look at this image, look at the number of people in these particular areas. And what does that really tell you? And this information that we're sharing with you, how is that really fitting for you? Where do you stand in all of this? Where do you have experience in any of these areas?
Those of you who got it completed, could you survive in poverty? How many of you have from 1 to 5 check marks? How many from 5 to 10? How many from 10 to 14? And
see, looking at this, I'm sure that when you are working with other groups of people, because you can understand, you have a different conversation. There is patience. I know that when I was part of this Rotary Club, I couldn't even understand to just have a pen with me. And I remember Wayne would say, here you go, just take this, or this is what they meant, or Bart would reach over. And these are people that say, I may be over here, but I can reach over and help you if you're willing to learn. And that's what it looks like.
Now under middle class, how many of you from 1 to 5 check marks? 5 to 10, 10 to 15. And those for the wealthy, the flip side, how many? 0 to 5. 5 to 10. And 10 to 14. That's the division of class, and each class has their own hidden rules by which that helps you survive. What that card is, those are survival skills in each class. And if you're moving from one class to another and you don't know those hidden rules, you don't have those kinds of skills, the chances are that you're going to survive in that particular class gets diminished very much. So, Claudine, next one, please. So, there's a difference between then reaction and responding. This is taken from Who Owns the Ice House. Click it, yeah. Oops, it's not doing it. Nope. Never mind. Okay. That's supposed to spread apart, and there's supposed to be a space in between there. And that space in between is indicative of the resources: time, emotional intelligence, financial, spiritual, support systems, all those kinds of things are in that space. And that space then creates, you think about those kinds of decisions. You think about the future, you make those kinds of decisions, and then that leads to opportunities and future stories.
Absolutely. So one of the great projects that I've been working on recently is I've been able to go into the jail, CJC, and talk to the inmates. And to be able to talk about when you get out, why do they continue to return back? When a person doesn't realize that they have any choice, they believe that they have lost the power to choose or that they have any power at all. And so I'm in there to teach them what are their true choices, even when society is saying you have to report here and still show up at work and you have to pay this bill that you don't have the money for. How can you find choice in there? And it makes a big difference.
So, the power of choice. So, can you cue the video?
Possible times, and I refuse to believe that my situation will improve. I realize this might be a shock, but if at first you don't succeed, try again is a lie, and success is really the luck of the draw. So in the future, I will tell myself that the situation was bad. My friends and family will understand. I had no choice. Compromising on my dreams is more important than trying to defy the odds. I tell you this, once upon a time motivation and hard work mattered, but this will not be true in my lifetime. These are the worst of times. Experts tell me my chances of getting a job are dismal. I do not concede that I will have a gratifying job. In the future, there will be no lifelong careers. No longer can it be said that motivation and ambition are key. It will be evident that my efforts will be in vain. It is foolish to presume that there is hope. And all of this will come true unless we choose to reverse it. There is hope. It is foolish to presume that my efforts will be in vain. It will be evident that motivation and ambition are key. No longer can it be said that there will be no lifelong careers. In the future, I will have a gratifying job. I do not concede that my chances of getting a job are dismal. Experts tell me these are the worst of times, but this will not be true in my lifetime. Motivation and hard work mattered once upon a time. I tell you this, trying to defy the odds is more important than compromising on my dreams. I had no choice. My friends and family will understand the situation was bad. So in the future, I will tell myself that success is really the luck of the draw, is a lie. And if at first you don't succeed, try again. I realize this might be a shock, but my situation will improve, and I refuse to believe that I am living in impossible times. Anything is possible.
You guys have time for questions, comments?
Yes, sir.
I'm in the education field, and I'm in the education field, and in District 11 in particular, I feel like we're struggling somewhat with being able to manage some of the impacts of families in poverty and dealing with the issues of children. I know it's a very complicated issue, but do you have some insight or ideas about basic things that school districts should be focusing on to help cope?
That's actually a fantastic question. As we talked about earlier, we are working very closely and almost adopted Queen Palmer, and we're doing a program with them. It's called Getting Ahead in a Just Getting By World. And it also, what that does is it spends anywhere from 10 to 15 weeks with different groups of families that are under-resourced or resource insecure, and teaching them the hidden rules and behaviors and open their eyes to things that they would not have known, helping them to build those resources. Social capital, what does that look like? Bridging capital, people who can help to bridge them to the next level, helping them to build a future story. Because if you don't have something out here and you don't have the resources to get there, you'll never be there. And so it's those types of things. So we have an entire curriculum on that, and as well as you could just pull that book and start looking up different pieces that would actually help.
We did a full day's training with the staff over there at Queen Palmer last fall before the school started, and they're just now getting set to recruit and select the group of parents that will go through the Getting Ahead program. So.
But I will say this, that we can tell people all day long what they need to do, but if we don't give them the resources to be able to do it, it's never going to help them. You know, they have to have the resources, and they have to have the support and the access. And a lot of times they don't have those things. Yeah. Yes.
So in the last 2 years, not this year, but I participated in the homeless surveys so that they could get federal funding for the counties. And in surveying all the homeless people, it was interesting in that their values were very, very different from mine. Clean socks, getting their clothes laundered, and being able to take a shower, building up the basic building blocks for some respect, were more important to them than almost anything else. Are you working on any kind of programs with that going on right now?
So we're not particularly involved, at least in this.
No, but I will say this, that there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if your basic needs aren't met, nothing else matters. I need to be clean before I can think about anything else. I need to be able to eat before you can tell me to stop, I don't know, smoking or doing drugs or whatever. I can't even think about those things until my basic needs are met. And that's where you start to see those differences. Absolutely.
Building on these answers, if enough people in this city got a requisite understanding of poverty, what do you see as momentum and progress that would really bump the needle could be made?
Let's ask a tough question here, huh? There's a movement going on in southeast Colorado Springs at the moment that is trying to provide entrepreneurial training in that area, creating businesses in that area. We're going to be getting ahead in that area. So, excuse me, so in addition to financial, I think more important is just the human relationships. Developing relationships with folks and being that bridging capital, networking. So that's what Rotary is all about, right?
And we just have to take the time to help people that just don't know. There's no way. I've gone from poverty to PhD, but I didn't get there by myself. I stand on the shoulders of others, and others had to teach me what I didn't know. And we have to be able to give part of that. It'll make a big difference.